Right, so it's Tuesday, first day of the rail strike.
Yeah, and it's the summer solstice, isn't it?
Longest day, yeah.
Yeah, longest day.
So we're on our way to Pevensey Castle. God, look at the queues here. We've had real trouble just getting out of there, haven't we? It's taken a while. Obviously, a lot of people are taken to the cars.
Yeah, it's a lot busier than it was yesterday. I don't think we'll stay out too late this afternoon. So we'll get it on the way back, won't we?
No, it's a bit overcast today. But anyway, looking forward to going to Pevensey Castle. We went there, it must have been 8-9 years ago.
2014, I think.
Mile, take the first exit from the roundabout onto the Trove.
What?
Yeah, it was about 2014, when, just before we moved.
Oh, just before.
Had a weekend at the bank holiday.
Oh, right.
We went then. And we've took Poppy was, was she then about 6 months old?
Yeah, that was probably her first castle.
Yeah, so I don't know if she remember. I remember taking Katie years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a nice castle. It's where the Romans landed, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
There's a load of history there.
Yeah. Should be interesting.
Yeah.
So stick with us and we'll catch up with you. Probably when we get there.
Yeah.
In 400 yards, take the fourth exit from the roundabout onto the A259.
Brown signs. Historic village and castle.
In 200 yards, turn left, then immediately turn right onto Church Lane.
Remember, he's only going to the postcode.
Yeah, yeah.
That'll shut him up.
Yeah. I think that's the pub we used to meet at.
Is it?
Yeah, I used to have little meetings there. The Smugglers. It's got a guard on the back. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This looks like the castle.
And this is the castle, yeah. So we could try that pub.
There's one here, I think.
There's another one as well.
Yeah. I think we went in here last time we came.
Yeah. Seem to remember the car park's not particularly big here. We did park our little Vista in here, didn't we, once?
Yeah, we did.
Pay and display here. So we'll go in here. And there is some extra parking over there. What's that say?
These are motorhomes here.
Oh, there is space for motorhomes there.
Yeah.
There's an Audi TT parked there.
Oh.
What is up with people?
I know.
It said Pevensey played a role in some of the most important events in English history, the Norman invasion and the anarchy to the Peasants' Revolt and the Second World War. Built in the 290s, Pevensey was sacked by raiders in 471 and left abandoned for a century. The Roman walls were re-inhabited in the 6th century, and by the time William Conqueror arrived in 1066, Pevensey was a prosperous town. The Normans built a castle in the Roman fort, and over the next few hundred years Pevensey was held by royal favourites and on occasion directly by the monarchy. After withstanding 4 sieges, medieval castle fell into ruin, again used by soldiers in the Second World War when Sussex prepared for invasion. Let's go and have a look. Come on then. Come on. All the walls all the way round.
Could be the Roman walls then.
Yeah, yeah. Still quite high in places.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that you heard. We had about 3 interruptions for dogs.
Probably a popular dog walking.
Yeah, obviously very popular for locals walking their dog here. For good reason. Oh yeah, it's a fantastic looking castle, isn't it, really? Very impressive.
Forces would have been open to attack from soldiers inside the castle, firing arrows from the rounded towers. The long, narrow, unglazed arrow slits protected the defenders from their enemy's firepower, whilst allowing them the opportunity to fire back at almost any angle. Soldiers attempting to undermine a castle's wall would do so with covered engines, battering rams with roofs. A wet moat would have made such a task a lot more difficult, especially since the defenders would be firing crossbows from the battlements and keeping up a barrage of rocks and stones. In the 4 sieges of Pevensey, the inner walls were never breached. Let's head back now to the inner bailey. This grassy area was once a bustling, noisy community. There were buildings here, a great hall for eating and gatherings, kitchens, sleeping quarters, storehouses, stables, workshops, and probably lean-to buildings made of wattle and daub with thatched roofs. And above them, on the ramparts of the curtain wall, soldiers pacing, always on the lookout.
Again, it's free for members. Adult and guidebook £12.70, but £8.70 for single adult. Family of 2 adults and up to 3 children, £22.60. So again, if you're a family, £90. 3 properties.
Possibly, yeah.
2,
I'm not
3,
sure
4 properties.
the actual annual
No.
subscription. Without looking on the
Concessions are
website.
£7.80, so that would be for us.
Yeah, so it'd be £15.60, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You start the
We've got the
commentary by
we've got the
pointing
guidebook.
player at an activation point, holding it no more than 30 centimetres. Remember that an ancient site like this has uneven floors and steps, so please take care at all.
Right.
This site has borne witness to events that have shaped the history of England. For over 1,700 years, a fortification has stood here at Pevensey. The first was a walled fortress built in the 290s by the Romans during their occupation of England. The fort would have been built either by the Gallo-Roman military commander Carausius or his successor
Oh, he built
Electus,
Porchester, didn't
who
he?
between them ruled Roman Britain between AD 286 and 296.
Right, shall we go in?
Yeah.
Carausius had declared himself Emperor of Britain and Northern Gaul, making himself an enemy of Rome. So, essentially, this was in effect a Roman fort built to defend against the Romans.
Oh,
Carausius was assassinated by his treasurer Electus, who ruled Roman Britain for 3 years before being killed by the army of Roman Emperor Constantius Chlorus in 296. At that time, the fort was called Anderida. It covered a vast area of 4 hectares. Perhaps 1,000 soldiers would have been stationed here, along with their livestock. After the Norman invasion in 1066, a castle was built here using the remains of the Roman fortifications. Some of the walls that are still standing are as tall as the ones the Romans would have built, about 8 meters high. Over the next 2 centuries, the castle was renovated and expanded, but after the 13th century, it gradually fell into disrepair. By the time of the Tudors, it was uninhabited. It was briefly brought back to life in 1588 when the Spanish Armada loomed over the horizon. And during the Second World War, the castle was refortified. Pillboxes were incorporated into the ancient ruins and soldiers were billeted here. These are all that is left of the castle chapel. Of all the buildings within the castle walls, this chapel was the only one that had stone foundations. The building itself would have been made of wood and may well have been rebuilt several times in the castle's history using these same foundations. The low iron fence here is protecting a grave slab marked with a cross. The large stone bowl is the remains of a font. 3 areas of a foundation can be made out: the north aisle, marked by the gravestone, the nave where the font sits, and the square outline towards the keep, which indicates the chancel. The chancel was the part of the church beyond the altar that was reserved for the clergy and the choir. Let's continue towards the North Tower now. When you reach the North Tower, walk down the steps to the basement. Do take care, as they are rather steep. You are now in the North Tower basement. Above you would have been a tower accessible by a narrow staircase. The uppermost floors would have been accessible from the walkways along the top of the curtain walls. The ceiling you see today is modern. In its heyday, this basement room had a curved or vaulted ceiling reinforced by stone ribs. You can still see the remains of the projecting stones or corbels which supported the ribs. Soldiers were positioned in the above tower, from which they had a wide view of the castle walls. The upper floors were accessible from the walkways along the top of the curtain walls. When you're ready, return to the inner bailey. Halfway up the steps, look out to your right. You'll see a side passage which goes directly out onto the bank of the moat, providing besieged soldiers with a secret exit. Once you're back at the inner bailey, carefully climb the wooden staircase that will take you up into the ramparts of the North Tower. Once you've reached the top, press the A button on your audio guide. Speaking of the Normans, if you head towards the panel marked the Norman Invasion and aim your audio guide at the activation point, I'll tell you the story of one of the most momentous events in English history, an invasion that took place on Pevensey Beach in 1066. It was upon the beach of Pevensey that William the Conqueror's invasion force landed on the 28th of September 1066. From here, the Norman army travelled over 10 miles to Hastings, where William swiftly erected a wooden fort. On the morning of the 14th of October, the Battle of Hastings was fought, and William's invaders defeated the army of Harold II, the last of England's Anglo-Saxon kings. It wasn't a hostile takeover made on a whim. William's claim to the English throne was, as he saw it, entirely legitimate. He even had the Pope's blessing. In fact, Harold himself was said to have earlier sworn to support William's claim. But on his deathbed, Edward the Confessor named Harold as his successor instead of William. After his victory, William parcelled out the county of Sussex to his most trusted followers. Pevensey was granted to a member of his close family, his half-brother Count Robert of Mortain, who built the first castle here. It was probably little more than a wooden keep surrounded by a bank and a ditch, secure within the defences of the surviving Roman wall. In 1088, a year after William's death, his son William II, or William Rufus, attacked Pevensey Castle. Robert de Mortain had rebelled against William Rufus, swearing allegiance instead to the king's brother, Robert Curthouse, the Duke of Normandy. Robert of Mortain and his brother Odo, the Bishop of Bayeux, fought off several assaults on the walls but finally surrendered through starvation. In its entire history, Pevensey Castle was never taken by force. However, it did endure many such sieges over the centuries. Robert de Mortain's son, William, inherited the castle after his father's death, but it was confiscated by the king and granted instead to the Norman aristocrat Gilbert de Lisle. The construction of the keep would have begun under either Gilbert or his son Richard's ownership around 1130. Pevensey Castle was taken from Richard and given to Gilbert de Clare, the Earl of Pembroke, by King Stephen. However, when Gilbert de Clare later rebelled against his king in 1147, the castle was besieged for the second time. Again, starvation forced the defenders to capitulate, and Pevensey Castle now belonged to the Crown. Before we take a look around, this is a good time to mention the Pevensey Castle exhibition. There have been archaeological excavations taking place here since 1852. Many of the artifacts found here are on display within the exhibition. By all means, take a look inside.
Something about the founding of Pevensey by the Romans. Under later Roman rule. It's talking about Aella and Sissa besieging Andrissa Casa, and then the Saxons arriving. And we've got here are some recreated Roman ceramics. Okay.
You want to go upstairs?
Poppy wants to go upstairs, so I'll go and have a look upstairs then. Let's have a look over here. About it falling into ruin. It's used in a Pevensey historical pageant of 1908. 2,000 people dressed up in costume, pretending to be Romans and medieval knights. Royal prison. Long sieges and rebellion. Unlike Porchester, it had lots of sieges, didn't it?
Yeah.
So it was beginning to become dilapidated, and a survey in 1306 estimated repairs would cost £1,000. During the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, court records stored in the Gatehouse were burnt. Yeah. Queen Eleanor and Henry III. Eleanor of Provence. 13th century manuscript of Eleanor of Provence. Like little cartoons, weren't they, some of these? 1101, Henry I took an army to Pevensey, preparing to resist another attempt by Robert Curthose to seize the throne, although they eventually landed at Portsmouth. During the anarchy between Henry I's daughter Matilda and his nephew Stephen, Pevensey was held by Gilbert de Clare, Earl of Pembroke, who supported Matilda, and he was besieged in the castle in 1147. Pevensey was a castle rising on a very lofty mound, fortified on every side by a most beautiful wall, fenced impregnably by the washing waves of the sea. William's warring sons. Lots of the Norman conquest as well. Hang on, Pops. Some artefacts here. Got a copper alloy buckle used for fast sling and plate armour. That's number 9. And I'm trying to see number 10. Number 10 is a. Oh, that's not what I'm looking at. Number 13 or 14. Iron horseshoe and spur. Looks like arrowheads over there. A iron ballista bolt's head, number 1. A copper alloy. Women's jewellery. You've got over there?
Got a travelling candlestick.
A travelling candlestick?
Yeah. 12.
Over there.
Oh, yeah.
Pope.
That's a lamp as well. That.
11.
That's Norman.
11, yeah. Oh, yeah. Craft and trade. Yeah. Someone answer that phone. You can answer it? Let's stop ringing now.
Yeah. You get
That's the thing about phones. If you leave them ringing, they stop ringing. Living in the castle, it's transformed into a hub of activity. Duke of Cornwall's light infantry were the first soldiers stationed at the castle, conducting exercises to test its defences. Built rooms inside the towers. God, but it was still a bit cold. A 20-foot diameter crate. A brigadier in charge, Mr. Clouting. Said Pevensey Bay was still a good landing space. First soldiers arrived in Pevensey in July 1940. Look at that evacuation. That's quite an impressive structure, isn't it?
Castles like Pevensey were largely unknown in the British Isles before the coming of the Normans, but as you look around, remember that the remains of the medieval castle today reflect 2 centuries of rebuilding, strengthening and improvements, as well as more recent modifications. The spherical stones in this pile and the others that you've seen were the ammunition used in the 13th century with giant catapults called trebuchets. The strength and accuracy of trebuchets was formidable. They could be aimed with great precision, and a besieger could direct missiles weighing up to 135 kilograms or 300 pounds at the same place in a wall for days on end at a considerable range. A missile landing on a stone wall would burst and splinter and could kill and maim with horrible efficiency. Missiles that landed intact could always be thrown back at the besiegers. If you'd like to hear about the 3rd siege of Pevensey Castle by the notorious Simon DeMonfort, press A on your audio guides now, or head to the steps that lead down to the Posturn gate, where you'll find the next panel. Simon DeMonfort led the 3rd siege in 1264. The supporters of Henry III had fled here after being defeated at the Battle of Lewes. The siege was lengthy and frustrating, and early in 1265 the besieging forces gave up and withdrew. While the castle held out, the siege left permanent marks. Considerable damage had been made to the northeast portion of the Roman wall in front of the keep, and records indicate that sections of the east wall, which comprised part of the medieval defences, also very soon collapsed. To the left of the pile of stone balls are steps that lead down to the Posturn gate, where you'll find the next panel. When you arrive, aim your guide at the activation point.
All right, Pops, come on and have a look down here. Come on, you're right.
The Posturn gate was a rear entrance to the castle. It was narrow and easily defended. Although the gate here is modern, you can still see the slots for the bars which once secured the entrance. The path from the gate led to the town of Pevensey via the salt marsh, a replacement to the earlier harbour. When the Romans and later the Normans were stationed here, this site would have been on the coast. The whole of the south area to the left would have been covered in marshland and lapped by the sea. But over the centuries, the marshlands of Pevensey have been silted up, and now the sea is over a mile away. The Saxon king Aella laid siege to the fort here in AD 471, and when it fell, he brutally massacred everyone inside. After that, the town of Pevensey was deserted, but it gradually came back to life, and by the start of the 11th century, it had become a flourishing port. Many centuries later, during World War II, American and Canadian soldiers were billeted here in the castle while they prepared to invade occupied France. They stayed here, in the room that you can see to your left. Walk over now to the next panel by the circular well and aim the guide at the activation point. This well is lined with stone to a depth of 15 meters or 50 feet and is of unusually large diameter. It still holds water. In the Middle Ages, the well would have been covered, not open to the sky as it is now. Water was precious, vital for everyday life, and especially if a castle was under siege. It had to be protected from contamination. There would have been a wooden well house covering the site and enclosing the well workings from the elements. Some castles even piped water from their well to the kitchen and other areas. If you walk back now into the Inner Bailey, I'll tell you about the final siege of Pevensey. In 1399, the Constable of Pevensey, Sir John Pelham, lent his support to Henry Bolingbroke, son of John of Gaunt, in his rebellion against Richard II. In retaliation, Richard's men lay siege to the castle. Although by that time the castle may have been in a semi-ruinous state, the remaining forces still held out, but conditions here in the Inner Bailey were horrific. The castle was crowded with soldiers, servants, women and children. The food ran out, and in desperation, pets, rodents and horses were eaten. There was no way of disposing of the dead, and refuse piled up. Eventually, Sir John sent a letter to Bolingbroke asking for his help. The siege ended when Richard II was forced to abdicate that same year, and Bolingbroke was crowned Henry IV. The king gave the castle to Sir John as a reward for his loyalty. Immediately on your left is a flight of steps spiraling down into the ground. It leads to one of the castle's dungeons. Go down the steps, but take care, they are steep and narrow. Welcome to Pevensey Castle's dungeon. Appropriately, given it was the Normans who built it, the word dungeon is derived from the French word donjon, which refers to the castle's keep. In medieval times, this is the dungeon where prisoners would have been held. By the time the Gatehouse was built in 1190, the use of prisons as a form of punishing criminals, rather than temporarily detaining them before their trial, was starting to become more common. However, with prisons yet to be built across the country, it was exclusively in castles like this that dungeons existed, ready to house unfortunate local lawbreakers. During World War II, this dungeon was used as a store, with a pump installed to the right of the door to keep everything dry. See if you can find the holes in the walls on the other side of the doorway. They held the timber which was slid across to secure the door from the outside. The stairs have been renovated with modern cladding, but you might be able to still see the original stone steps. Take your time to look around the dungeon. When you're ready, carefully climb the steps and head back out onto the grass.
Go on, down you go. Taking Poppy down the dungeon. Oh, it's a bit dark in here, isn't it, Poppy? I don't think you'll like that. Ooh. Oh, imagine being stuck in here, Poppy. You off, are you? You don't like it then? Oh, very wet, dank. Go on then, Pops, let's get out of here. Don't go down a bit, I'll have to stay up. Go on then, go on. There was a wall walk with some explanation of what was happening during the Second World War around the walls, but we missed that, unfortunately. So we're just going to go down here, see what's down here. That takes you into the rest of the village. There we are. See the thickness of these walls. Yeah. And the D forts all along, so it reminds you of Portchester, doesn't it? Yeah. Right, let's go and find some lunch. Yeah, we're just heading down the road. We're going to go to the Smugglers down here. I think we'll go in the garden. You want to just have a look inside? See what there is. 16th century inn and restaurant. All right, anyway, Tuesday, Thursday, 12 to 2:45.
Yeah.